There's something magical and special about European canal cities. Whether you're in Bruges, Amsterdam, Stockholm, or Venice, there's a magic that you can't quite explain as you navigate the waterways. Amsterdam might be known as the Venice of the North, but there's a lot more to both of those cities than the magic of their canals. Both of these famous waterlogged cities are densely packed with distinctive cultures, architecture, and cityscapes. Out here on A Sense of Travel, my goal is to capture all 5 senses of as many cities, countries, and natural wonders around the world as I can, so that I can accurately immerse you into the physical experience of these places through the screen. Now that said, today, I'm diving into more than just the things you can experience through photography or through bullet lists on a blog. How do Venice and Amsterdam stack up in the way that they smell, the way the air feels, the ambience and the lore that creates the magic of the atmosphere, the sounds that fill your ears in the city streets, and, of course, the tastes that define each experience? I'll find out today in the latest episode of Comparing the Senses, Venice versus Amsterdam. After the video, be sure to comment on which of these 2 cities you feel like has an experience that fits your persona more. I'm Michael, and this is A Sense of Travel. Let's dive in. So, before we take on the senses, let's take a look at some very quick facts about each city in case you aren't familiar with either one. Venice isn't just the famous canal-ridden island that you might be familiar with, although that's where we're landing today. Nearly 260,000 people call the city of Venice home, and there are over 850,000 people in the metro area. Amsterdam's city limits hold over 900,000 people, and its metro area is around 2.5 million people, making it a solid deal larger than Venice or its surrounding region. Venice is located in southern Europe in the northwest corner of Italy, perched on the edge of the Adriatic Sea, and, in the historic island's case, on the sea itself. Amsterdam lies near the north coast of continental Europe in the Netherlands, a Central European country that's bordered by Belgium and Germany. So the first thing to look at when stacking up Venice and Amsterdam is perhaps the most obvious thing: their historic, picturesque cityscapes. So let's kick off in Venice. Venice is a city that's very much influenced by the water, and its cityscape reflects that. On the historic Venetian island, there are no roads. Instead, there are hundreds of canals, both wide and gaping, and both narrow and winding. The strikingly aqua-blue water drifting into the canals splashes slowly against the old brick and plaster facades of pink, orange, beige, and white, some of which are weathered away to expose the stone or brick beneath, and many with balconies adorned in greenery or laundry hung out to dry. Arched bridges, both small and large, cross over the canals. The city is entirely low-rise, with a few exceptions. Above the roofline of clay terracotta roofs, Venice's lagoon islands are dotted with aged bronze domes of magnificent basilicas, old brick bell towers, and the San Marco Tower, all of which date back hundreds and hundreds of years. Venetian architecture rests heavily in the Gothic and Renaissance realms, with decorative archways in a serpentine shape, these are called ogee arches, and intricately detailed stonework alongside a style called Rococo, which involves often over-the-top ornamentals. Now, the splashing, aqua-blue waves of the Adriatic Sea that surround the lagoon of an island, along with the countless boats, gondolas, and bridges, create a uniquely nautical atmosphere. Amsterdam sits 7 feet below sea level, and it's incredibly influenced by the water. The ring of canals that make up its old town, which we'll explore soon, and water in general, is a huge component of Amsterdam's cityscape. There are no bare facades in Amsterdam. Every single building involves some degree of ornamentalism. Many of the old brick buildings lean at odd angles with black inserts in between them to hold them strong, some protruding forward, others to the left or the right. The whimsical nature of the brick buildings, accented in white and topped with rooflines of arches, stepped bricks, and gables, create an atmosphere right out of a storybook. As you wander about, you notice that Amsterdam's city streets aren't cobbled, but they're paved with a brown brick. You'll notice that the Amsterdam flag flies far more often and far more prominently than the Dutch flag, and generally speaking, the color palette of the city is pretty muted. Throughout town, you'll notice lots of brick and concrete and other interesting modern structures. Now, there are modern high-rises in Amsterdam, but they're away from the old city center and they aren't super imposing. The high-rises here aren't that tall, but they do have really interesting shapes. For example, building blocks at odd angles with trees atop the exposed part of each block. There are no modern 20th or 21st century buildings on the historic city center of Venice, however. None. Everything from the buildings to the bridges to the tiled piazzas is weathered, aged, and waterlogged except for the well-kept and protected magnificent domed cathedrals. At the center of the city is San Marco Piazza, graced in beautiful Rococo architecture and crowned with the colorful and rather mystical San Marco's Church and the bell tower. Beyond this plaza, the old city is literally a maze. When you aren't wandering alongside a canal, wedged in between ancient weathered buildings, you find yourself in narrow, tight, dim pathways abundant with small nooks and crannies. That's an In Bruges reference, for those of you who know. But seriously, the locals can find their way around without getting completely lost every single day is truly a mystery to me. The old island is completely navigable by boat, and you'll see gondolas cruising through the canals at any given point. Now, Central Amsterdam, or Centrum, has to be one of the largest old towns I've ever seen. Ringed by medieval canals radiating from the center, the alleyways and streets of tilted Dutch buildings, packed narrowly together, stretch for ages. The buildings lining the multiple rings of canals in Centrum are both intricately ornate and diverse. Every single facade looks unique and special in some way, whether it's through the varying roof lines, the general facades, the accent colors, and the placement, and the heights. Collectively, they create an eclectic and busy, but somehow cohesive feeling throughout the old town. The aged, tree-lined canals cutting through the medieval streets are filled with a deep, murky brown water. Riverboats and city tours ripple the water underneath the arched bridges, which are lined with flower pots and planters and filled with cyclists, pedestrians, and perhaps the occasional car. As you gaze through the shops and the markets, you notice dozens of cheese shops, head shops, businesses oriented to the free spirit, your typical chain stores, and an abundance of plant and flower shops. Flower markets are pretty big here. Now, the city's overall color palettes differ quite a bit from each other in regard to their cityscapes, as indicated right here. When you see a picture or a video of a place and you try to imagine what it must feel like to actually be there, an important component is the way the air smells. Let's see how Venice and Amsterdam stack up. Venice's scentscape can honestly be summarized in one word: waterlogged. Especially as you wander around the canals, fishy marine water fills your nostrils. As you peruse the outer edges of the historic island, salty air surrounds you thanks to the salt water of the Adriatic Sea. It isn't just water that creates that waterlogged scent in Venice, though. The weathered and aged buildings that densely blanket the city have been worn and dampened over the ages by the sea breeze, leading to that musty, damp smell in the stone and brick. Throughout the day, those fishy, wet stone-scented alleyways and canals begin to fill with the smells of freshly baked bread, sweet pastries, and homemade pasta. All things considered, if I were to create a Venice-scented candle, it would smell of sea breeze, marine water, baking bread, stone, and pasta noodles. Just like in Venice, the scents that you'll experience in Amsterdam can be summed up by the word waterlogged. Fishy river water rolls through the dozens of canals in the heart of Centrum, right along the wafts of cannabis, cigarette smoke, and damp brick. Now, away from the canals, sweet Dutch bakeries baking up poffertjes and stroopwafel add a sweet layer to the damp air, and the breeze carries the aroma of tulips from the flower pots and shops, of which there are tons. If I could make a candle that captured the smells of Amsterdam, it would include river water, chocolate, hemp, earth, smoke, and tulips. The tastes that define cities around the world, in my opinion, are one of the best ways to capture a place's identity. Italian and Dutch food are in no way similar, and I think that makes this comparison all the more exciting. To compare the tastes of both cities, let's start in Venice. Given its seaside location, Venice's culinary scene is definitely influenced by the sea, and it has a taste palette of its own that really differentiates it from the rest of Italy. Here are just a few of the city-defining dishes. Bigoli in salsa. A Venetian staple, bigoli in salsa is an absolute must-try if you're in the city. I stumbled upon Osteria al Portego deep into the mixed-matched patchwork that is Venice, and I'm so glad I did. In the style of a traditional taverna, Al Portego serves up Italian pub fare relatively cheaply. Bigoli in salsa was only 14 euros. The bigoli noodles were thick-cut and dense, and the hot sardine spread on top is also thick, chunky, and very fishy. Tramazzini. Bar alla Toletta is known to tourists and locals alike as one of the best spots to grab a Venetian staple called tramazzini. Now, these snack-sized sandwiches are filled with an assortment of delicious spreads. The ones I tried ranged from quite traditional to a bit niche. The flavors are rich and pop with each chew, which is something I've found to be pretty consistent with all of the Italian cuisine I've had. Zaletti. There are too many Venetian dessert creations to count, but at a place called Rosa Salva, the baker informed me that Zaletti was about as Venetian as it gets. Zaletti is a dense shortbread that seems to have raisins baked inside and it's covered in a powdered sugar. At least at Rosa Salva, the cookies are really large and long, and I had two, alongside an Americano. The tastes that define Amsterdam are quite a bit more hearty than Venice and definitely a bit cheaper. Amsterdam is a very sweet-tasting city, and they like those sweet treats to be fried. And I mean, who could blame them? Here are just a few of the dishes that I think capture the Dutch capital's culinary identity. Stroopwafel. At Van Holland, near Dam Square, I found perhaps the sweetest treat in the Netherlands. Stroopwafel. A stroopwafel is a classic Dutch dessert, and this large, thin, flattened waffle is doused in melted dark chocolate and covered in dense, sweet chocolate shavings, and it packs in a sweetly heavy punch. Bitterballen. Dutch snacks abound in Amsterdam, and one that really stuck out was bitterballen. Little fried balls of beef stew that were refrigerated until thickened. These crunchy, pot pie flavor reminiscent little guys were found at a restaurant and bar attached to Hotel Prins Hendrik near the central station. Poffertjes. At René's Croissants near Dam Square, I dug into a sweet Dutch breakfast delicacy called poffertjes. They're miniature little pancakes soaked in maple syrup and dusted in powdered sugar, and they're served alongside delicious coffee. Poffertjes may be my new favorite form of pancake. As you can see, the tastes are very different, and there's really no clear winner because it's completely subjective. This is also not even close to a comprehensive list of the defining tastes of each city. Venice is an incredibly refreshing city, especially from an American perspective, because guess what you won't hear on the historic island? Cars. Instead, motorboats trudge through the cloudy aquamarine water, which creates the additional soundscape of clapping lagoon waves into the seawalls. Seagulls cry into the chilly air, which is filled with the sounds of trotting tourists on the old tile and cobbled stone. During a Venetian evening, you'll hear modern dance club tunes bumping from the shops and nightclubs, juxtaposed with street musicians strumming classic Italian chords on the guitar. Amsterdam, by comparison, is also a refreshingly quiet city, at least by day. The sounds of street dining, bike bells dinging, and seabirds crying fill the relatively quiet atmosphere. Just like in Venice, a large part of the quiet soundscape is the lack of cars. At least in Centrum, there just aren't that many. Instead, the city is filled with cyclists, motorbikes, and pedestrians. Instead of the massive parking lots you'd find in the United States, Amsterdam Center is filled with small parking decks made exclusively for bikes. I should note that my experience in Venice happened in the wintertime. On a winter's morning in Venice, it's cold. Like, really cold. The water from the sea and the humidity it creates makes it feel much colder. By midday, however, it's still chilly, but the air feels more comfortable. Fortunately, a lack of high-rise buildings allows for more sunlight. Given its humid subtropical climate, however, summers in Venice are humid and sticky. While my Amsterdam experience was in the springtime, you'll find it to be just as windy and brisk as Venice, again, thanks to the sea. Spring and summer in the city can be quite warm and thankfully rather dry, meaning the atmosphere feels perfectly pleasant. Places like Vondelpark really showcase just how pleasant. I mean, seriously, a warm sunny day in this lush, earthy green park feels like the epitome of bliss. So, what do I mean when I talk about the comparison of the ambience and the lore of each city? For starters, I'm a strong proponent of the idea that to really capture the spirit and the magic of places around the world, you have to let your imagination run wild a little bit. I mean, after all, urban legends, mythological fairy tales, and dramatized history are a really big part of the identity of cities and countries worldwide. Letting fantasy and folklore infiltrate your mind as you wander around can really bring out the mystique and the charm in different places. Venice feels like a fairy tale fishing town with a touch of Roman mythology and an overall aura of mystery. As you wander through the absolute maze of alleyways and pedestrian streets in the dense historic island, you can't help but feel as if you've been whisked away into a world where everyone around you is part of a fantastic and rather eclectic mythological adventure. And I don't know, maybe it's the men rowing through the canals on their gondolas, or the spine-chilling stories of the waterlogged houses deep into the maze, or the dark legends at the Bridge of Sighs, or the imposing and weathered statues of old Roman legends, or the colorful and astrological murals embedded into the architecture, but Venice is the perfect setting for almost any type of magical story. There's also a bit of an Atlantis feeling in Venice. As you may know, the city is slowly sinking into the sea thanks to climate change in part, but also because its foundations of wood are literally sinking into the sand of the seafloor. Amsterdam also feels like a fishing village, but in contrast, it feels like a medieval one straight out of a fantasy film. When I first visited, the first thing I thought of was Lake Town from The Hobbit. The tilted brick buildings along the gaping canals spanned by arched bridges and punctuated by ornate decoration, all beneath the iconic Amsterdam flag billowing in the wind, make for an atmosphere that could really fit into a fantasy kingdom of old. Amsterdam's colorful, artistic, and certainly countercultural identity can be felt no matter where you turn, whether it's an accidental stroll through the red light district, or a walk through Vincent van Gogh's priceless artwork, or a cannabis-scented stroll through Vondelpark. Round it all out with that presence of royalty at the Dutch Royal Palace, and it's hard not to imagine yourself as the main character of an intriguing and rather mysterious adventure. Thanks for diving in today to the famous canal cities of Venice and Amsterdam with me, and stay tuned for more city comparisons in the near future. As always, thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.